Hello and welcome. We are back with Maria Arias. She is a licensed professional counselor, a play children's therapist, and a parenting coach. Molly, last week we were talking about this self-care, and as I rewatched our video, I started noticing that you were actually implementing it on yourself. And I am normally somebody that could be considered very high energy, quite high energy to be honest. And you were just self-regulating yourself. And I wanted you to explain that to us because you did an amazing job. And honestly, we've had conversations off, camera where you and I have been talking about it. And I have been implementing what you have said. And I do feel much calmer. But I think that parents really need to, know what you did and how you did it, because it will help them. And then we can tie it into the classroom. So should we give it a go?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you, Dana, for bringing this up, because what I was doing was something that I was doing sort of behind the scenes, right? It's like we're going to open it up and look inside, because we were having a conversation about self-care, but then you noticed in rewatching the video that I was doing active self-care and that it had an impact on you as you and I were connecting. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's a beautiful, beautiful thing called co-regulation. And so it's super important when dealing with parents or when parents dealing with children or ourselves dealing with each other in this kind of chaotic times, is to understand this principle.
Can you explain exactly what it means? I mean, because it was fascinating, and I did feel the change within myself. And I know that I've strived to do that in the classroom with some of the students, where yes. I'll be calm so they can be calm. But it was quite complex when you started to explain it to me, off of the camera. And I do think that everybody would benefit from this.
Absolutely. So sometimes intuitively we know if I get calm, it will affect those around me. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and I very deliberately I notice what I'm feeling. I notice how my body is feeling first. And then I stick with it and I breathe and I, start to expand my capacity to be in a stressful situation. So parenting your child at home is a super stressful situation. And so, and teaching your child at home, right, is a very stressful situation. And being on a video can be a stressful situation. So I'm aware that what my body's doing and I stay with it, but I also am connecting with you at the same time. So it's a skill that we can learn to connect to ourselves and then connect to another at the same time.
So I've got a question. You mentioned, for example, stress and emotions and feelings through our conversations. I know that I see that you're doing.
Yeah.
Can you explain the difference between these so that they become clear for us, and then we can?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So an emotion is felt in your body first.
Okay.
And that's why we need to become aware of what our body is feeling. So when I'm talking to you on the video and you notice me doing it right now, I started to feel a little bit of tension, and then I become aware of the thoughts that are connected to should I be talking about the feelings and emotions? So I'm listening to you and I'm listening to myself. And as I'm connecting to myself, I take deep breaths in and out, and I try not to make a big deal about it. And this is important for parents because parents, sometimes we take a deep breath and our kids are they're irritated with us. Are you mad at me? Because we go, oh, so I try to do it kind of low key, as you can see a little bit. I mean, you're noticing me.
Yes, I am.
But I try to be kind of low key about that. I'm managing over here so that I can be present with what's happening. So we want to notice our emotions, and then they become a mental feeling. So if we get spooked by something when we play startle, some kids really like to play startle games, for example, like a Jack in the Box, boom, ah! So that first happens in our body, right? Our hand goes up and we tremble, and then we say, oh, whew, that was scary.
It was, right? And then I have to bring myself back.
Yeah, and kids love to play those games, just as a side note, because they're learning to manage those feelings. So hide and seek and peekaboo and chasing games are always to play to manage those emotions, which really means the physical reaction.
So just so that I'm very clear, I want to make sure that I'm getting this correctly, Molly. I first will feel something in my body, which is the actual emotion, and then the way I interpret it is the feeling.
Yeah. And it has to make it up to our mental awareness. Sometimes we're not even aware. So sometimes we live in a really stressful situation, and we can describe, we were talking about like working in schools can be so stressful, and what teachers are going through today, and teachers teaching remotely, and parents being really the ones in charge at home of the remote learning. These are all super stressful situations, right?
Totally. So
as we talked about that, it's like, we understand that stressful situations can happen. And so sometimes the stress can build, and we're not even getting the feeling. We're just getting the emotion. So our body will feel it, stress. But that's where we get the shoulder aches, and that's where we get the stomach aches. And that's where we're like, oh, our body takes a beating because we're not listening to it to get, well, this is stress. Okay. So as I'm talking to you now, I think, okay, I feel something in my body. I label it and I breathe with it so that I can then increase my capacity for stress.
When you say increasing our capacity, I understand. I mean, I don't know, when you say that, it's like, how could I take any more stress? But what you're saying is that it is a skill that you're building up. I can build my capacity to feel more stress, but not let it affect me as much because it's not like in my body. I'm sort of thinking of anxiety with children in classrooms. I mean, the days before we left and everybody went home in March were very stressful. You could feel the stress in the building. I mean, there was like a prickly sense. To give it a name, I don't even know. It was weird. There was like this prickliness per se, and the feelings, we didn't know what to do with those feelings. We didn't know. So what I'm understanding is just recognize it, realize it, and then we start to acknowledge it. Is that what we're doing?
Well, I think that's such a good example, Donna, because like I'm thinking about you, like you started in schools, and by the time you became a librarian, you had 700 kids that you were in charge of. So that's a capacity that you increased.
Totally.
I cannot even imagine. Yeah. So that's something we can do the same with our capacity for stress. But when you talk about March, it was such the clinical term for trauma is something that we cannot handle. And another clinical term that we use in therapy and psychology with the play therapy that I do is flooding. We were all flooded. What happened was way beyond a capacity that we had. We have since grown our capacity in lots of different ways, even though we probably still get flooded every day with what's happening, which means our body and mind and all of these emotions and feelings, that it's too much. Mm-hmm. So when something is too much, it's like we have to chip away at it day by day. And so, when I work with parents and teachers about self-care, I say, do it moment by moment. Don't even wait until your child's gone to bed to self-care. Self-care right there in front of them. Do what I do, what you and I are discussing in the videos, like feel your body, feel what emotions are going on, see what feelings are there, become aware of them, and breathe and stay with them. And so you can have one foot in and one foot out.
So one foot in within the stress, but one foot out, so that I am able to shift my weight back and forth and regulate myself.
Yeah, exactly. And you can't ignore the stress because it'll stay there. So you've got to feel it. You've got to feel the stress and be outside of it at the same time.
So we started doing this thing.
Yeah.
We're mimicking. And we have been talking about what do I do with my kids, for example, at home? When we're mimicking each other, we are doing something that's helping us self-regulate. It's my understanding.
Yes. Absolutely. So this whole conversation is about co-regulation, like that we regulate each other. And it's just true for all of humanity. And so it's a very powerful secret tool for parents. When your child is off the wall, if you start connecting with them, regulating here and connect with them, you can start giving them some tools.
Okay.
So you didn't teach your child how to talk. You didn't teach your child how to walk. They just picked it up from you. So they're going to pick up from you how to regulate heavy emotions, big emotions. So one of the exercises that we did that you and I can do, that people can do with their children, is just like right now, for example, do a movement and I'll copy you.
Okay. So, hold on. Should we talk about something first before that like stresses me out a little bit so they can see it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy, but one of the things that, has me worried is that we're going back to school. We're going to be online. In schools, teachers are expected to perform. Yeah. And the performance is expected to be high. Therefore, we have administrators who have district people on top of them who are asking for all these different expectations, and the stress that is placed on all of us is quite large. And as I'm saying it, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to perform when I don't even have the kids in front of me and I have to do it through a computer? And I mean, principals breathe down teachers' throats. They do. I say it with the utmost respect, and I imagine it has to do with their supervisors and so forth. And with the idea that education is, we're producing something. But the children are already there. It's not that we're in my mind personally, it's not that we're producing, it's that we're bringing out the gifts that they already have. And when we're talking about the production, because, children do become scores in many cases. No matter what the districts say and what they think.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you and I both have been in education for a long time. We both know that children, and as I'm speaking, I'm seeing that you're self-regulating, you're breathing.
Yeah.
But these children, become their scores. Their scores are what matter. And
it's so, yeah.
And I'm saying that, and I'm like,
yeah, I can feel my jaw tightening up.
Me too. And I can, and as I'm saying these, these scores, there's so much more to a child than a score. And not all children are going to be able to perform at this level, because each one is individual. And those things, all these scores do not take this into account. So when I think that, it stresses me, and I can feel it. I can feel it in my jaw as well. I guess we're cousins, and therefore we get this.
Yeah.
But now let's start doing
absolutely.
the movement to calm, so that I can relax.
Yeah.
This is what you would want. You would want somebody that is starting to feel stressed. What to break that stress?
Yeah. So make a movement, and we'll do a little co-regulation.
Okay, I'm going to start making 8s with my hand.
Yeah. You can make another movement if you'd like.
Okay.
That was harder. Okay, so just for a second, I'm going to stop and you keep moving.
I don't like it when you stop.
How it feels, yes. And I'm just going to pick right back up with you.
And I felt it in my throat, and I felt it in my stomach.
I wanted to cry, yeah.
Uh-huh. And as you say cry, I feel like I want to cry too.
Yeah, so that we can do another movement together and we'll reconnect.
Do
whatever you want. We don't know. Yes, that's okay. So this is the attachment piece with our kiddos. And when you're describing this super stressful situation for you, that has been living probably in your body, it's like a stressful situation. And all our kids have their own, and we all have these challenges that are really, just even defy, why is this happening? But we can, at that same given moment, we can connect with each other. And that's where our strength, Donna, our resilience as humanity is going to be to connect to each other. Because when you and I connected to each other, there was, I perceived a reduction in stress. So how did you feel comparing when we connected and when you were talking about your stress?
When we were doing it together, I was happy. Yeah. Then when you stopped and I kept on doing it, I kind of felt silly. I kind of felt dumb. I felt it in my throat.
Yeah.
And I felt it in my belly. Not sure why, or my gut. Not sure why. but I felt it. But then you started doing it again, and you started doing this one, and it was like, okay, she's being silly with me. I'm not alone. I'm being validated. I'm being
Yeah,
seen.
exactly. And so that's a little activity that parents can do with their kiddos, or you can, a person could do with their spouse or a friend. And it just, it shifts gears in our body out of the stress mode. And so we can lower stress. And then we want the optimal environment is low stress, high challenge. And so we know globally we have some stressors going on. So the challenge may not be able to be as high, but the more we can work on lowering stress, which is this self-regulation, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and connection. The connection will immediately lower the stress, even though you have years of education stress, we're talking about parents and teachers, administrators, all of that just goes away for a second when we connect.
And it was a brief second, but it allowed me to feel like, okay, I will be able to do this year.
Yes, then you can problem solve. Yeah.
And it gives space, which is just amazing. Now, as I'm thinking of that, I'm thinking of, I know that the reptilian part of the brain is down here, and that the problem, like once I am able to regulate, I know that there's kind of like, I'm going to turn sideways.
Yeah.
So I understand, this is my understanding, and I know that you know much more about this. This is the reptilian part of the brain, and then there's, I imagine, like a bridge between this and the frontal lobe. And the frontal lobe is the part of where, okay, I can start not reacting, but actually solving my problems and my challenges.
Yeah.
How does that work? That is like interesting.
So this is such a great piece to what we're talking about, because the reptilian brain is, it's actually nonverbal, Donna. Like there's actually, the reptilian brain is just looking for survival, looking to perceive threats. And that's when our child is really nonverbal. That's when they're in their brain stem, and that the reptilian. The reptilian brain also sometimes comes up here to this middle bridge. And the bridge is the part that I want to talk about with you. But the prefrontal lobe, like you said, is here. This is where our executive functioning skills are. So they're our ability to manage our attention, our time management, empathy, impulse control, all of these things that we want live up here. And we can have a more in-depth conversation, I'd love to, about the executive skills.
Of course.
But today we can just talk about the bridge between the two, which is the limbic system. And the limbic system is, sometimes we do the brain model like this. Yeah, we can do it together. Okay. So if this is your spine, this is your brain stem here, kind of like the pad of your palm. The brain stem, survival, safety. And if you tuck in your thumb, this is the limbic system. And this is the bridge too. This is the prefrontal lobe, and the little front knuckles are really like that prefrontal cortex. So this is an evolution of the human brain. And so up here is really the problem solving. But we have to make the trip from reptilian to limbic, and limbic is emotional. So we cannot go from safety and nonverbal to problem solving without an emotional bridge. So the emotions are the bridge. So the emotions are the feelings in our body and the feeling that I'm having. So, when we do this together and we're feeling connected. Yeah. And your face says to me, I'm feeling happy.
I am.
And when we talk about stress, our child might look at us and we can read them. They might be feeling sad. They might be feeling scared. So our bodies are talking to us. Our friends' bodies are talking to us. Our children's bodies are. So those are the emotions that then we can problem solve. That's why that worked together for you, because we connected emotionally. Then you can move to problem solving.
Which is what we want for our students.
Absolutely. We want children who can take on challenges. And we're in a big challenge right now.
It's a huge challenge. And it's also the same thing for the parents. So therefore, I think that this would be helpful for them. One other thing, I am thinking of many, many years ago, I heard Anthony Robbins. I mean, I'm talking 20 years ago, maybe even more. I heard Anthony Robbins talk. And he gave an example. I mean, it was one of those vivid. He said that when him and his wife, were not in agreement on something, that instead of arguing, one of them would have to go do something funny. And that he would, I remember this like yesterday, as if it were yesterday, that he would run out and chase her and they would play kind of like tag to break that stress.
Yes.
Is that a good, I mean, how is that part of what we would be talking about, the reptilian brain and the limbic and then going to the frontal cortex? Does that do the same kind of effect? It just, I mean, well, God bless him. It's one of those things that why it stayed with me, I don't know. But it did.
Yeah, it's so good. So playfulness is emotional. So play is how we process emotions.
Okay.
And so if your child is too upset and too far gone, they might not be willing to play. I know sometimes if I'm too upset, I can't do it. But if you can catch someone before they're too upset and you can make play a part of your everyday, especially with children, that's what I do as a play therapist. Play is like, it's lighthearted and it's a way to process emotions for sure.
That's awesome. Now, what happens when the child is so far gone?
Ooh.
What do we do then? Because we know that a lot of that is happening. You know, just because everybody's stressed at the house and everybody is mirroring and creating that per se prickly environment, and this is a principle of heat that my daughter was talking to me about, that heat in itself, it feels prickly. And even though we cannot feel the energy, we can feel it. And it's that feeling of anger feels like heat. To talk about scientifically, there's like if there were too much friction within one room. So we're all stressed, we're all creating friction one against the other, which is creating in a way heat, and we need to cool it down. Yeah. Kind of bring it down. What do you do?
It's really, as you're talking, Donna, I want to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is parents and adults and how we need to be more mature than our children.
Mm-hmm. Not always.
And so that is, that's the tough one. That's the tough call. But we have more capacity because we have our prefrontal lobe. The prefrontal lobe is not fully developed until you're 24. So expecting the child's behavior to shift so that we can shift is backwards, because then you have the 4-year-old or the 13-year-old in charge of the entire house. And you don't want that because their brain is not fully developed. So whatever you have to do as the adult in these super hard times, we have pressure on top of pressure on top of pressure. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes for me, it has taken a shift in understanding that our children need us to be in a hierarchical position with them. We need to be a hierarchy. We need to be the alpha and we need to lead. But if we are falling too much into the reptilian brain with our kiddos, there's really not someone to lead us out.
And that's what makes it really difficult. And we do see that. I see a lot of that at school, quite a bit of it actually, in these last years, where parents are afraid to lead. And I think that I'm not sure, this is my personal interpretation. I think that we are so afraid that we were going to hurt our children emotionally because maybe many of us in prior generations were led by harsher environments. You do this because I'm telling you to. You just follow instructions. You don't need to question. And those can really hit you like a ton of bricks. And parents, out of their love for their children, are saying, wait, this isn't working. This that they did with us isn't working. And instead of standing strong in our power as parents, we many times swing to the other side of the pendulum where we become.
So let me talk to you about what we become lower than them.
Yes.
So attachment can only work in alpha and dependent.
Okay.
So children need an alpha. If we're not the alpha, they will try to become it, and it will look like demanding behaviors and stuff, and parents will start to fall in a dependent role. So that's really a whole nother conversation, like how to regain our alpha presence so that children can relax.
That is like an incredible conversation that we will have to pick up next week. How's that?
Yeah, that's a good one.
So let's leave it at this and pick up where we left today next week. How's that?
That's great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time around.